The crayon was red. The paper was white. And the picture 4-year-old Lily Caruso was drawing looked like something from a nightmare. Nadia Brennan sat cross-legged on the floor of her tiny office at the Eastside Children's Clinic, watching the little girl work with the careful attention she gave all her patients. 20 minutes into their first session, and Lily hadn't spoken a single word, hadn't looked up, hadn't acknowledged Nadia's existence beyond a brief, flickering glance when she'd first entered the room. But she was drawing. That was something. The clinic was quiet today, a rare Tuesday afternoon lull between the usual chaos of underfunded, overcrowded sessions. Nadia had $47,000 in student debt, a lease she couldn't quite afford, and a waiting list of traumatized children that grew longer every week. The East Side Clinic was the only place in the borough that offered free art therapy for kids, which meant it was perpetually overwhelmed and desperately understaffed. Nadia wouldn't have it any other way. She'd found her calling in the wreckage of her own childhood, in the grief counselors who'd tried and failed to reach her after her sister Maya was killed in a drive-by shooting. She'd been 11. Maya had been 7. And for 3 years afterward, Nadia hadn't been able to speak about it at all. Art had saved her. The therapist who'd finally broken through had done it with a box of pastels and an infinite well of patience, letting Nadia draw her pain when words felt impossible. Now Nadia did the same for other children, other families, other wounds that couldn't be stitched with language alone. Lily Caruso was one of the worst cases she'd ever seen. The referral had come through 3 days ago, flagged as urgent. 4-year-old female, the intake form had read. Witnessed mother's violent death 8 months prior. Complete selective mutism since the incident. Multiple therapists attempted without success. Father requesting specialized art therapy intervention. The father hadn't been what Nadia expected. She'd assumed wealth from the address. An Upper East Side penthouse that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. But she hadn't expected the man who'd carried Lily into the clinic that morning. All dark hair and darker eyes and a face that looked like it had been carved from Roman marble. He'd worn a suit that cost more than Nadia's car and moved with the coiled tension of a predator pretending to be tame. Dante Caruso. She'd looked him up after he left. The internet had provided fragments. Heir to a shipping empire. Widowed last spring. Notoriously private. But there were other whispers too, in the spaces between official records. Rumors about the Caruso family's real business, about the bodies that had piled up over generations, carefully hidden beneath layers of legitimate commerce. Mafia, the rumors said. Old blood. Dangerous. Nadia didn't care. The child in front of her was hurting, and that was the only thing that mattered. "That's a beautiful red you're using," she said softly, keeping her voice warm and unhurried. "I like how bright it is." Lily didn't respond. Her small hand moved steadily across the paper, pressing hard enough that the crayon left waxy ridges in its wake. She was drawing a figure, a person, Nadia thought, though the proportions were distorted in the way children's drawings often were. "Can you tell me about your picture? Or show me, if you'd rather not talk?" Nothing. The crayon kept moving. Nadia waited. Patience was the most important tool in her arsenal, more valuable than any technique or theory. Traumatized children didn't operate on adult timelines. They needed space to feel safe, room to approach trust at their own pace. So she sat on the floor of her cramped little office with its secondhand furniture and water-stained ceiling, and she watched a billionaire's daughter draw what looked increasingly like a crime scene. The red wasn't a color choice. It was blood. Nadia kept her expression neutral, her breathing steady, even as her heart began to pound. The figure Lily was drawing lay on the ground, surrounded by spreading crimson. Standing over it was another figure, taller, darker, rendered in harsh black strokes. A man. Looming over a body. "That's a very important picture," Nadia said quietly. Thank you for showing me. Lily's hand paused. For the first time since entering the room, she looked up, and Nadia felt the impact of those eyes like a physical blow. Gray, like storm clouds, ancient in a face that still had baby fat clinging to its cheeks. This child had seen something no child should ever see, and it had carved itself into her soul. Lily pointed at the dark figure. Then she pointed at her own chest. I saw this. That was what she was saying. I saw the bad man. You saw him, Nadia said. The man who hurt someone. A tiny nod. And you've been carrying that all by yourself. That must be so heavy, sweetheart. Lily's lower lip trembled. She looked back down at her picture, and for a moment Nadia thought she might speak, might finally break through the wall of silence she'd built around herself. Instead, she picked up the black crayon again and began adding details to the dark figure. A face, this time. Features emerging from the void with surprising clarity for a child so young. A sharp jaw, heavy brows, a thin mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Nadia watched the face take shape, memorizing every line. This was evidence. This was testimony rendered in crayon and trauma, and it might be the only window anyone would ever get into what Lily Caruso had witnessed the night her mother died. The session ended at 4 o'clock. Lily allowed Nadia to walk her back to the waiting room, where a severe-looking woman in a gray suit stood waiting. A nanny or assistant, Nadia assumed. The woman took Lily's hand without warmth, already turning toward the door. Wait. Nadia crouched down to Lily's level. Can I keep your picture? I'd like to show it to your papa if that's okay, so he can understand what you're feeling. Lily hesitated. Then she reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew a folded piece of paper, different from the one she'd drawn during the session. Older, more worn, as if it had been carried around for weeks. She pressed it into Nadia's hand and held her gaze with those ancient, terrible eyes. Then she turned and walked away, her small hand swallowed by the nanny's grip, leaving Nadia standing in the middle of the waiting room with 2 pieces of paper and a growing sense of dread. She waited until the clinic had emptied for the day, until the fluorescent lights buzzed in the silence and the street outside had faded to evening gray. Then she unfolded the second picture. This one was more detailed, more deliberate. Lily had worked on it for a long time, adding layers and nuance, pouring everything she couldn't say into the strokes. It showed 3 figures. A woman lying on the ground, her yellow hair spread around her head like a halo. A little girl crouching in the corner, hidden behind a chair, watching. And standing over the woman's body, his face rendered with chilling precision, was a man. Not a stranger. Not a monster from imagination, a specific man. Someone Lily knew. Someone she had drawn with the accuracy of familiarity. Nadia stared at the face for a long time. She didn't recognize it, had no reason to, given how far removed her world was from the Carusos. But she knew what this picture meant. She knew that somewhere in Lily's life, walking freely, perhaps even trusted, was the man who had murdered her mother. And Lily had just handed Nadia the only evidence of his identity. The phone number Dante Caruso had left was answered on the second ring. Miss Brennan. His voice was cool, controlled, giving nothing away. Is something wrong with Lily? No, I mean, yes, but... Nadia took a breath, forcing herself to steady. Mr. Caruso, I need to show you something. Tonight, if possible. It's about your wife. Silence on the other end. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder, sharper, the pretense of civility stripped away. I'll send a car. Be ready in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Nadia stood in the empty clinic, holding a dead woman's portrait in one hand and her killer's face in the other, and wondered what she'd just set in motion. The car that arrived was black, sleek, and utterly silent. Nadia climbed into the back seat, clutching her worn leather satchel, the two drawings tucked carefully inside, her heart hammering against her ribs like something trying to escape. The driver said nothing. The city blurred past the tinted windows, first the familiar streets of her neighborhood. Bodegas and laundromats and apartment buildings with fire escapes clinging to their facades like metal vines, then gradually shifting into something else entirely. Wider avenues, taller buildings, doormen in pressed uniforms standing guard outside lobbies that gleamed like jewelry boxes. By the time the car pulled up to a limestone tower on Fifth Avenue, Nadia felt like she'd traveled to another planet. The elevator required a special key. It climbed 40 floors without stopping, and when the doors opened, they revealed not a hallway, but a private foyer. Marble floors, fresh flowers, a chandelier that scattered light like frozen rain. Dante Caruso was waiting for her. He stood in the center of the foyer with his hands in his pockets, his jacket discarded, his shirt open at the collar. Without the armor of his suit, he looked younger, more human, but his eyes were the same, dark and fathomless, giving nothing away. Miss Brennan. He didn't offer his hand. Thank you for coming. I didn't have much choice. Your driver wasn't exactly chatty about alternatives. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or the ghost of amusement. No, I don't imagine he was. He gestured toward an archway on the left. This way, we can speak privately in my study. The study was lined with books, real ones, leather-bound and well-worn, not the decorative props rich people use to seem intellectual. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the warmth of the evening. 2 glasses of amber liquid sat on a table between leather chairs, though Nadia hadn't seen him pour them. Sit, he said. Please. She sat. He remained standing, his back to the fire, his silhouette carved against the flames. You said this was about my wife. No preamble, no small talk. Nadia appreciated that, even as it made her nervous. Your daughter drew something during our session today. She opened her satchel and withdrew the first picture, the one Lily had made in the clinic, red crayon and black shadows. This is what trauma looks like when a child can't speak about it. She's processing what she witnessed by recreating it, over and over. Dante took the picture. His face remained impassive, but Nadia saw his knuckles whiten around the edges of the paper. She's drawn this before, he said quietly. Dozens of times. The therapist said it was normal, part of processing. It is normal, but this isn't what I brought you here to see. Nadia withdrew the second picture, the folded one, the one Lily had pressed into her hand like a secret. She gave me this at the end of our session. I don't think she's shown it to anyone else. Dante set down the first drawing and took the second. He unfolded it slowly, carefully, as if handling something fragile. Nadia watched his face. She saw the exact moment he recognized the figure in the drawing. His expression didn't change, not outwardly, not in any way a casual observer would notice. But something behind his eyes went very still and very cold, like a lake freezing over in an instant. Where did she? His voice cracked. He stopped, started again, and this time the control was back, iron hard and absolute. This face. You're certain she drew this? I watched her give it to me. She's been carrying it around, Mr. Caruso, for weeks, maybe longer. She wanted someone to see it. Do you know who this is? No. Should I? Dante set the picture down on his desk with exaggerated care, as if he didn't trust himself to hold it any longer. When he looked at Nadia, his eyes burned with something that made her breath catch. This is Marco Vitale. He's been my father's advisor for 20 years, my advisor for the last 5. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried an undercurrent of violence that made Nadia's skin prickle. He was the first person I called the night my wife was murdered. He held my daughter while I identified the body. He has been helping me search for her killer for 8 months. The implications crashed over Nadia like a wave. He's been watching me grieve, watching me rage, watching me tear this city apart looking for answers. Dante's hands curled into fists at his sides, offering comfort, offering counsel, all while knowing exactly what he'd done. Mr. Caruso, Dante. The word came out sharp, almost angry. If you're going to be part of this, you'll use my name. Part of what? He turned to face her fully, and Nadia understood for the first time exactly what kind of man she was dealing with. Not a businessman playing at danger. Not a figurehead coasting on family reputation. A predator, wounded and furious, who had just identified his prey. My daughter gave you this picture for a reason. She trusts you in a way she doesn't trust anyone else. Not her nannies, not her therapists, not even me. He took a step closer, and Nadia had to fight the urge to retreat. I need that trust. I need you to keep working with her, to help her heal, to unlock whatever else she might be holding inside. And I need you to do it here, in my home, where I can keep both of you safe. Safe from what? From Marco. From whatever he's planning next. Dante's jaw tightened. He killed my wife for a reason. I don't know what it is yet, but I will. And until I do, everyone close to me is in danger. He paused, his dark eyes searching her face. Including you, Miss Brennan. You became part of this the moment my daughter handed you that picture. Nadia should have been terrified. Should have been running for the elevator, for the street, for anywhere that wasn't this gilded cage with its beautiful monster. Instead, she thought of Lily's eyes, ancient and wounded and desperate to be understood. I have conditions, she heard herself say. Dante's eyebrows rose. Conditions? I'm not your employee. I'm Lily's therapist. Her well-being comes first. Before your revenge, before your investigation, before everything. If I think something is hurting her, I'll say so, and you'll listen. And if I don't, then I walk, and I take everything I know to the police. Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then, slowly, something shifted in Dante's expression. Not quite respect, but something adjacent to it. You have spine, Miss Brennan. I didn't expect that. Most people don't. That's their mistake. He studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. We have a deal, he said. Welcome to my home. Nadia took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and sent an unexpected jolt of electricity up her arm. She told herself it didn't mean anything. She was already beginning to suspect she was wrong. The first week was the hardest. Nadia moved into the penthouse on a gray Wednesday morning, carrying 2 suitcases and a box of art supplies that rattled with every step. Her room was on the same floor as Lily's, a guest suite larger than her entire apartment, with windows overlooking Central Park and a bathroom that featured a tub she could practically swim in. She tried not to think about how much the towels alone probably cost. The household operated with military precision. Staff appeared and disappeared like ghosts, leaving fresh flowers and perfectly folded linens in their wake. Meals materialized at exactly 7, 12, and 6. Lily's nannies rotated in shifts, efficient and interchangeable, their interactions with the child professional but distant. No wonder she didn't speak. No one was really listening. Nadia changed that. She converted a corner of the penthouse's vast living room into an art studio, easels and paints and stacks of paper in every color. She sat with Lily for hours each day, drawing alongside her, never pushing, never demanding, simply existing in the same creative space. Slowly, impossibly, Lily began to thaw. It started with small things, a glance that lingered instead of sliding away. A crayon pushed across the table in Nadia's direction, an offering, an invitation. the ghost of a smile when Nadia drew a lopsided elephant and pretended to be offended by her own lack of skill. By the second week, Lily was drawing different pictures, still dark, still heavy with unprocessed grief, but populated now with new figures. A woman with brown skin and curly hair, standing beside the little girl in the corner, holding her hand, keeping her safe. The first time Nadia saw herself rendered in crayon, she had to excuse herself to cry in the bathroom. Dante watched all of this with an intensity that made Nadia's skin prickle. He was rarely present during the day. His business kept him locked in meetings, phone calls conducted in rapid Italian, conversations that stopped abruptly whenever Nadia entered a room. But he appeared each evening for dinner, sitting at the head of a table too large for 3 people, asking Lily questions she couldn't answer, and listening to Nadia fill the silence instead. "She drew a butterfly today," Nadia would say. "First time she's used yellow in weeks." And Dante would nod, his dark eyes fixed on her face, absorbing every word like a man dying of thirst. "Tell me what it means," he said one night, after Lily had been put to bed. They sat in his study, the fire crackling low, 2 glasses of wine untouched between them. "The colors, the shapes. You see things in her drawings that I don't understand. Art therapy isn't magic. It's just—" Nadia paused, searching for words. "Children process trauma differently than adults. They don't have the language to describe what they've experienced, so they find other ways to express it. Colors, images, patterns. It's like learning to read a new alphabet." "And you speak this alphabet?" "I learned it the hard way." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Dante's eyes sharpened, and Nadia found herself continuing despite her better judgment. "My sister was killed when I was 11. A drive-by shooting. Wrong place, wrong time. I didn't speak for almost 3 years afterward." Dante was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "How did you find your way back?" "A therapist who didn't give up on me, who sat with me in the dark until I was ready to reach for the light." Nadia looked down at her hands. "That's what I want to be for Lily, the person who waits." "You're already more than that." Dante leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze unwavering. "She looks for you first thing every morning. She shows you her drawings before she shows anyone else, even me. You've given her something I couldn't, no matter how hard I tried. You gave her safety, security, a father who loves her beyond reason." Nadia met his eyes. "Don't discount that. It's the foundation everything else is built on." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, a connection that went deeper than words. Nadia felt it settle into her bones, warm and terrifying. She excused herself shortly afterward, retreating to her room with her heart pounding and her mind racing. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. And every day she spent in this gilded prison, she felt herself falling further into something she couldn't name. 3 weeks into her stay, Marco Vitale came to dinner. Nadia didn't know he was coming. She walked into the dining room with Lily's hand in hers and stopped dead at the sight of a stranger at the table, a man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah," he said, rising from his chair. "You must be the miracle worker I've heard so much about." "I'm Marco, an old friend of the family." He extended his hand. Nadia took it automatically, her mind screaming warnings even as her face arranged itself into a polite smile. This was him, the man in the drawing, the man who had murdered Lily's mother and spent 8 months pretending to grieve alongside her husband. "Nadia Brennan," she managed. "Nice to meet you." "The pleasure is mine." His grip lingered a moment too long. "Dante tells me you've made remarkable progress with little Lily. We've all been so worried about her." Lily had gone rigid at Nadia's side. Her small hand tightened into a fist around Nadia's fingers, and when Nadia looked down, she saw naked terror in the child's eyes. She knew. Of course she knew. She'd been in the room when this man killed her mother, and now he was standing 3 feet away, smiling at her like a favorite uncle. Lily and I were actually just heading to bed, Nadia said, keeping her voice light. It's past her usual time. Please excuse us. She didn't wait for permission. She scooped Lily into her arms and walked out of the dining room as quickly as she could without running, feeling Marco's gaze on her back like a blade. That night, Lily had her first nightmare in 2 weeks. Nadia held her through it, rocking her in the darkness, murmuring nonsense words of comfort while the child shook and sobbed. When Lily finally fell back asleep, Nadia crept out of the room and found Dante waiting in the hallway. His face was carved from stone. She recognized him, Nadia whispered. The moment she saw him, I know. Dante's voice was barely audible. I saw her face. You can't let him near her again. Whatever you're planning, whatever game you're playing with him. I'm not playing games. Dante stepped closer, and in the dim light of the hallway, he looked like something ancient and terrible. I'm hunting, and tonight I got exactly what I needed. What do you mean? Marco came to dinner because he's nervous. Someone tipped him off that I've been asking questions about the night Alessandra died. He came to see if I suspected anything. Dante's jaw tightened, and I let him leave thinking he was safe, thinking I was still the grieving fool he's been manipulating for months. Dante? He'll make a mistake soon. They always do, when they think they've won. His hand came up, almost unconsciously, and brushed a strand of hair from Nadia's face. Until then, I need you to keep doing exactly what you're doing. Keep Lily safe. Keep her healing. His voice dropped. Keep her close to you. And what about you? The question came out smaller than Nadia intended. Dante's expression flickered. A crack in the mask, quickly smoothed away. I'll be fine. I always am. He turned and walked into the darkness before Nadia could tell him that wasn't what she'd asked. The call came 2 days later. Nadia was in the art studio with Lily, working on a collaborative mural, a garden scene full of flowers and butterflies and a smiling sun. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she stepped away to answer it. Miss Brennan? A voice she didn't recognize, cold and professional. This is Metropolitan Hospital. Your mother has been admitted to the emergency room. Nadia's blood turned to ice. My mother died when I was born. I don't have... We have a Rosa Brennan here, listed as your emergency contact. She was brought in after an accident outside her apartment. Hit and run. She's asking for you. Rosa, her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after Maya died, who had held her through the silent years, who was the only family Nadia had left. I'll be right there. She hung up and turned to find Lily watching her with knowing eyes. The little girl crossed the room and wrapped her arms around Nadia's waist, holding tight, as if she understood exactly what was happening. As if she knew this was just the beginning. Marco Vitale had found his leverage, and Nadia had just become a target. The hospital was a trap. Nadia knew it before she even reached the lobby. She'd called Dante from the car, his driver, because she wasn't allowed to leave the penthouse alone anymore. He'd answered on the first ring, his voice sharp with concern, and told her to wait, to let him send men ahead, to not walk into anything without backup. She'd agreed, and then she'd walked into the hospital anyway, because her grandmother was somewhere inside, hurt and scared and asking for her. And Nadia had spent her entire life being the person who showed up. The emergency room was chaos. Crying children, harried nurses, the particular smell of antiseptic and fear that Nadia had learned to associate with the worst moments of her life. She pushed through the crowd to the intake desk, her heart hammering. Rosa Brennan, she said. She was brought in after a hit and run. I'm her granddaughter. The nurse consulted her screen, frowning. I don't have anyone by that name. Are you sure she was brought here? Ice flooded Nadia's veins. I got a call from this hospital. They said, Nadia. The voice came from behind her. Familiar. Wrong. She turned slowly, already knowing what she would find. Marco Vitale stood in the corridor leading to the exam rooms, his hands in his pockets, his smile as warm and empty as it had been at dinner. Beside him stood two men she didn't recognize. Broad-shouldered, dead-eyed, the kind of men who existed only to hurt people. Your grandmother is fine, Marco said pleasantly, probably confused about why I sent flowers to her apartment this morning, but otherwise unharmed. I apologize for the deception, but I needed to speak with you privately. Nadia's mind raced. The hospital was crowded, public, full of witnesses. He couldn't do anything to her here. Could he? What do you want? Straight to business. I appreciate that. Marco gestured toward the corridor behind him. Walk with me. There's a chapel on the third floor. Quiet, private. Much better for the conversation we need to have. I'm not going anywhere with you. I think you will. His smile didn't waver. Because if you don't, my associate is going to visit your grandmother's apartment. The real one this time. And Rosa is, what, 78? 79? Fragile bones at that age. So easy to break. Nadia's hands curled into fists. She thought of her grandmother, alone in that apartment in Brooklyn, unaware that a monster had already found her address. If I go with you, you'll leave her alone? You have my word. His word meant nothing. She knew that. But she also knew that refusing would only delay the inevitable, and every minute she stalled was a minute Dante had to find her. She followed Marco to the elevator. The chapel was empty, as he'd promised. A small room with wooden pews, stained glass windows that caught the last light of evening, and a silence that felt thick enough to choke on. Marco's men stationed themselves at the door, blocking the only exit. Sit, Marco said, gesturing to a pew. Nadia remained standing. What do you want? I want to know what you've told Dante. His pleasant mask slipped, revealing something colder beneath. About me, about what his daughter might have seen. I'm a therapist. What my patients share with me is confidential. How admirable. Marco moved closer, and Nadia forced herself not to retreat. Let me be more specific. Did the child draw anything? Any pictures that might be problematic? Nadia's heart pounded. If she admitted to the drawings, Marco would know exactly how much danger he was in. If she denied them, he might believe her. Or he might decide she was lying and hurt her anyway. She chose a third option. Lily doesn't draw anything, she said. She's too traumatized. Most sessions she just sits there, staring at nothing. I'm not even sure she remembers the night her mother died. Marco studied her face for a long moment. You're lying. I'm telling you what I've observed. Believe it or don't. I think I don't. He reached into his jacket, and Nadia's stomach dropped as he withdrew a photograph. This was taken 2 weeks ago, outside Dante's penthouse, you and the child walking into the park. She's carrying a piece of paper. I had my people enhance the image. He held up the photograph. Even from a distance, Nadia could see what it showed. Lily clutching one of her drawings, the dark figure visible in the corner of the frame. You have something that belongs to me, Marco said softly. A picture my goddaughter drew. A picture that could create certain misunderstandings. I want it back. I don't have it. Dante does. Then you'll get it for me. Marco's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with bruising force. Or I'll start removing fingers until you remember where it is. Fear spiked through Nadia's body, primal and absolute. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. The same stubborn fury that had carried her through 3 years of silence, through grief and poverty, and a world that never stopped trying to break her. "Go to hell," she said. Marco's face twisted. He raised his hand. The chapel doors exploded inward. Dante Caruso entered like a force of nature, flanked by men who moved with the precision of soldiers. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, Marco's guards were on the ground, disarmed and groaning, and Dante was walking toward Marco with murder in his eyes. "Let her go." The words were quiet, almost gentle. They were also the most terrifying thing Nadia had ever heard. Marco released her wrist and stepped back, his hands rising in a gesture of surrender. "Dante, I can explain." "You can't." Dante didn't stop moving. He crossed the space between them with predatory grace and drove his fist into Marco's face with a sound like breaking stone. Marco stumbled backward, blood streaming from his nose. "Listen to me." Another blow, and another. Dante hit him methodically, systematically, each strike carrying 8 months of grief and rage and betrayal. Marco fell to his knees, then to his back, his face a ruin, his hands raised in useless defense. "You killed her." Dante's voice cracked on the words. "You killed Alessandra. You stood in my house and watched me mourn her, and you killed her." "It was business." Marco choked on blood, his words slurring. "The Ferraro alliance. She was going to tell you about the negotiations. I couldn't let—" "She was my wife." Dante grabbed Marco by the collar, hauling him up until they were face to face. "She was the mother of my child, and you took her from us for business." Nadia watched from where she stood, trembling, unable to look away. She should have been horrified, should have been sickened by the violence unfolding before her. Instead, she felt something fierce and protective surge through her chest. This man, this dangerous, broken, beautiful man, was avenging the woman he'd loved and the daughter who'd been shattered by loss, and Nadia understood him completely. Dante's hand moved to his waistband. A gun emerged, pressed against Marco's forehead. "Any last words?" Marco's eyes found Nadia. "She's next, you know. The therapist. Whoever gets close to you, they all end up dead." Dante didn't flinch. Not this one. The shot echoed through the chapel, sharp and final. Marco Vitale crumpled to the ground and didn't move again. Silence fell. Dante stood over the body, his chest heaving, the gun still smoking in his hand. He looked like something from a Renaissance painting, the avenging angel, terrible and righteous and utterly alone. Then he turned, and his eyes found Nadia. The mask crumbled. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest with desperate strength. She felt him shaking. This man who had just executed his oldest friend without hesitation, trembling like a child in her embrace. "I thought I was too late." His voice was ragged, broken. "When I realized where you were, what he was going to do, I thought I'd lost you too." "You didn't." Nadia pulled back just enough to cup his face in her hands. Blood stained his knuckles, his shirt, the corner of his jaw. She didn't care. "I'm here. I'm right here." Nadia. Her name was a prayer on his lips. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. I've never—" "I know." She rose on her toes and pressed her forehead to his. "I know. We'll figure it out together." His mouth found hers in a kiss that tasted like blood and tears and salvation. Nadia melted into it, into him, letting go of every reason this was impossible and holding on to the only thing that mattered. They were both broken. They were both survivors. And somehow, impossibly, they'd found each other. When they finally broke apart, Dante's men were already cleaning up the scene, erasing evidence with practiced efficiency. The chapel looked almost peaceful, if you didn't know what to look for. We need to get back to Lily, Nadia said. She'll be scared. She'll be fine. She's got 4 guards and 2 nannies watching her. Dante tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But you're right. She'll want to see you. She'll want to see both of us. Something shifted in his expression. Wonder, maybe, or the first fragile stirrings of hope. Both of us, he repeated. I like the sound of that. Nadia took his hand, blood and all, and let him lead her home. 3 months later, Lily Caruso spoke her first word. They were in the art studio, the same corner of the penthouse where Nadia had spent countless hours sitting in silence, waiting, hoping. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, painting everything gold, and Lily was working on a new drawing with a focus that bordered on reverence. Nadia sat beside her, adding flowers to her own canvas, sneaking glances at Lily's progress. The little girl had changed so much in the months since Marco's death. The shadows under her eyes had faded. The tension in her small shoulders had eased. She laughed now, real laughter, spontaneous and bright, and she reached for Nadia's hand without hesitation, trusting in a way she hadn't trusted anyone since her mother died. But she still hadn't spoken. The words remained locked inside her, waiting for something Nadia couldn't quite provide. Until today. Lily set down her crayon and studied her picture with a critical eye. Then she picked it up, crossed the room to where Nadia sat, and held it out for inspection. Look, she said. One word. Soft and rusty from disuse, barely louder than a whisper, but unmistakably, miraculously, a word. Nadia's hands trembled as she took the picture. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back, desperate to see what Lily had created. It was a family portrait. 3 figures stood in front of a house, holding hands beneath a smiling sun. A tall man with dark hair, a woman with brown skin and curly hair, and between them, a little girl with gray eyes, her smile taking up half her face. Beneath the figures, in wobbly crayon letters, Lily had written a single word: home. Oh, sweetheart. Nadia pulled Lily into her arms, holding her tight, letting the tears fall freely now. It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's us, Lily said, her voice growing stronger with each word. You and me and Papa, our family. Nadia couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She held this precious child and felt something crack open in her chest. A door she hadn't known was closed, letting in light she hadn't known she needed. Footsteps in the hallway. She looked up to find Dante standing in the doorway, his expression frozen somewhere between shock and wonder. She spoke, he said. I heard her from my study. She spoke. Lily wriggled out of Nadia's arms and ran to her father, waving the picture above her head. Papa, look, I drew our family. Nadia helped me with the flowers, but I did the people all by myself. Dante caught his daughter and lifted her into his arms, his eyes bright with unshed tears. He looked at the picture, then at Lily, then at Nadia, and something in his face broke open in a way that made her heart ache. Our family, he repeated softly. Is that what we are? Lily nodded solemnly. Nadia is going to stay forever. I decided. Did you? Dante's gaze found Nadia over his daughter's head. And what does Nadia think about that? Nadia rose from her chair, her legs unsteady, her heart pounding. 3 months ago, she'd walked into this penthouse as a therapist doing a job. Now she stood in the middle of something she'd never dared to hope for. A family that had chosen her. A child who needed her. A man who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. I think, she said carefully, that Lily should probably ask me herself. Lily's eyes went wide. She looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Nadia. Will you stay? She asked. Forever and ever? Will you be my... She stopped, suddenly shy, the word too big and too important to say out loud. Nadia crossed the room and knelt in front of them both. This man and his daughter, this broken family she had helped piece back together. Yes, she said, forever and ever, if your papa agrees. Dante set Lily down gently. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, and Nadia's breath caught in her throat. I was going to wait, he said, his voice rough. Find the perfect moment. But I think my daughter just made the decision for me. He opened the box, revealing a ring, antique gold, a deep red ruby surrounded by tiny diamonds, catching the afternoon light like captured fire. This was Alessandra's grandmother's ring. She left instructions for it to go to whoever helped Lily find her voice again. Nadia's hand flew to her mouth. Dante. She knew. His eyes glistened. Somehow she knew that someone would come along who would be exactly what our daughter needed. What I needed. He took a shaky breath. I loved my wife. I will always love her. But she's gone. And you're here. And I have learned that the heart is not a finite thing. It grows. It expands. It makes room for new love without diminishing the old. Papa, Lily whispered, tugging at his sleeve. You have to ask the question. A laugh escaped him, wet and raw and beautiful. You're right. I do. He took Nadia's hand in his, the ring box balanced between them. Nadia Brennan, you walked into my life because a little girl drew a picture. You stayed because you have more courage and compassion than anyone I've ever known. You gave my daughter her voice and gave me a reason to hope again. He swallowed hard. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Lily's mother and the heart of this family that you helped rebuild? Nadia looked at the ring, at Lily, bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement. At Dante, this dangerous, tender, complicated man who had shown her that love could exist in the most unlikely places. She thought of her sister Maya, who would never get to grow up. Of her grandmother Rosa, now safely installed in a brownstone Dante had purchased 3 blocks away, surrounded by gardens and sunlight and more security than a small army. Of all the broken pieces of her life that had somehow arranged themselves into something whole. Yes, she said. 1,000 times. Yes. Dante slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her across decades and tragedies, patient and certain. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, soft and deep, a promise sealed in fire. Ew, Lily announced. Kissing is gross. They broke apart laughing, and Nadia scooped Lily into her arms, pulling Dante close until they were a tangle of limbs and joy and happy tears. Get used to it, little one, Dante said, pressing a kiss to his daughter's forehead and then another to Nadia's lips. There's going to be a lot more kissing in this house from now on. Lily made a face of exaggerated disgust, but her arms wrapped around both of them, holding tight, holding on. Nadia closed her eyes and let herself feel it all. The warmth, the safety, the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had spent her whole life helping other people find their way out of the dark. She had never expected to find her own light waiting for her in a penthouse in Manhattan, in the arms of a man the world called dangerous, in the drawings of a little girl who had lost everything and found hope anyway. But life, she was learning, rarely followed the paths we expected. Sometimes the most beautiful destinations were the ones we stumbled upon by accident, a wrong number, a misdial, a picture drawn in crayon by a tiny hand. Sometimes home wasn't where you started. It was where you finally allowed yourself to stay. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.